Hello and welcome to SBK Unplugged, Sheldon Bosley Knight's Land and Property podcast. My name is Kate Gould and I'm the host of the show. Today I am joined by Rebecca Dean, who is our Lettings Director. Welcome, Becca. Nice to have you in the studio. Before we start, I'd like to thank One Mill Street once again for having us in the studio today. We're very grateful that you're able to accommodate us each time. So thank you very much, guys, for having us again. So, Becca, lettings, a big department, possibly one of the biggest within the business. And I know it's grown enormously over the year that you've been with us.
Yes.
I wanted to find out a bit more about the department, what you guys do, what your role is specifically, and a bit about how you help our landlords. I know there are quite a few challenges at the moment, what with various legislative changes and things like that. But just a sort of feel of the business and what you guys do would be great. But before we start, I'd like to find out a bit more about you personally and your route into land and property and how you came to be at Sheldon Bosley Knight. So,
Okay. Well, hi, Kate. Thank you for having me. It's really good to be here, and I'm always happy to talk all things lettings. So yeah, I'm Becca. I have been in the industry now for just over 21 years. I know I don't look old enough. But yeah, I started my journey into lettings and property accidentally, actually, which I think tends to happen with quite a few people. But I was 18 years old. I guess I need to go a little bit before that, really. So I wanted to go in the Navy. Decided against going in the Navy in the end, and applied for lots of different jobs. The good old Lichfield Mercury it was at the time, so where everything was in newspapers. Applied for lots of jobs, ended up landing an interview with a local independent estate agent, which was actually for a sales negotiator role. I, after the interview, chased the director up that interviewed me. The position had actually gone internally, and he spoke to me about a lettings role instead. And at the time, I was thinking, I don't really know what that entails. What's lettings? But decided to give it a go. I did 2.5 years in that role with that small independent, which was based in Lichfield. And then a friend of a friend approached me about a role that they had within another local independent business, which was West Midlands based. And I took the job there as an inventory clerk, and worked completing inventories, checkouts and property visits for about a 12-month period with that company. I then progressed, worked my way up the ladder with that business, ended up lettings director over a network of 10 branches, which was running a portfolio of just over 2,000 fully managed properties. Things obviously progressed, moved forward. It was all great. And then somebody from Sheldon Bosley Knight reached out to me in January of last year to see whether I was interested in hearing about a role with Sheldon Bosley Knight. So I thought, well, it's worth having the chat, which is how I came to meet Mike. And then the rest is history, really. I accepted the job here as head of lettings and started 3rd of April last year. So just had my 12-month anniversary.
Excellent. Well done.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations.
Can't believe where the year's gone, to be honest. It's been very, very fast paced, but really exciting and loving the challenge.
Excellent. So, but your job has kind of exploded, really, hasn't it? Because when you came in a year ago, we looked a little smaller, shall we say?
Yeah, just a little bit. So, when I joined the business last year, there were a number of acquisitions that had just been completed, which gave us our foot into Leicestershire. So I think my biggest role at the time was to integrate the Leicestershire portfolio and bring those acquisitions together and then split them into 2 branches. So that's what I spent a fair bit of time doing, rebuilding teams. Obviously, that means bringing in new members of staff and just implementing processes. In total, there were 9 branches. So 9 of our Sheldon Bosley Knight branches that were offering a letting service. And there were some numbers that were pulled together for a meeting that we had yesterday, actually. So there were 36 members of staff within the team at the time. And we had just over 2,400 fully managed units over those 9 offices. So since then, a year later, fast forward, we're now 15 branches offering a letting service and just over 5,500 fully managed units and over 70 members of staff within the lettings department. So, the word exploded, I think, just about covers it, to be honest with you.
So has that been your main focus in your first quite exciting year? Or have you been doing other things as well?
Yeah, so I think obviously integrating Leicestershire was one of the biggest focuses and challenges, really. But in addition to that, we've obviously continued to grow. So it's meant other acquisitions that have had to be migrated into the business. Some of those have come with new members of staff. So it's making sure that the new members of staff are migrated correctly into the business and they know what their job roles are, what the systems look like, what the processes are. And in addition to that, it's just being a support to the current teams that we've got. So we've got a great team of lettings managers within the business already. And, they know their day-to-day jobs. They do their day-to-day jobs really well, but that support and somebody just to go to and be able to drive and grow the business has been needed. So that's been a bulk of my role as well. And that's what will continue going forward.
So talk to me about the department then as a whole. What do your teams, across Leicestershire, Warwickshire, Gloucestershire, what do they do on a day-to-day thing? How do they help our landlords?
There's absolutely no 2 days in lettings that are the same. And I think everybody within my team will say that. And I think that's one of the reasons why, if you love lettings, really, you love it for that reason, because no 2 days are the same. It never gets boring. I think if any member of the lettings team ever came to me and said, I don't really have anything to do, I'd be thinking, we might have a problem here then. I think they would all agree with that as well. So in terms of helping the landlords, we do everything from the initial lettings valuation right the way through to obviously the tenant moving out in terms of our fully managed service. But then it goes beyond that as well, because you just never know what's going to happen during a tenancy. So we assist landlords with things like court proceedings when necessary. Not the nice thing to talk about within the industry, but it does happen. Obviously, compliance is a massive factor, so it's making sure all of our landlords understand the regulations, the legislation, what's expected of them, what's needed for a tenancy to be compliant. And we help landlords as well for, anything from that kind of single accidental landlord that never really planned to let the property. It could be their family home, right the way through to, big investor clients who have got a portfolio of properties that they let and have managed with us.
And these are residential properties, aren't they?
All residential,
so
yes.
You just deal with residential?
Yes, that's enough of a role on its own, to be honest with you, Kate. But yes, just residential.
So you touched on the various challenges for landlords, and I suppose things that they need to be aware of, perhaps, like you say, the accidental landlords who never planned to be a landlord might not know about. So what are the things, if somebody were to come to you and say, I've just inherited a property, or I want to let out my property because I'm moving elsewhere, what do they need to know, and what do they need to be aware of in terms of their obligations as a landlord? Yeah,
so, it's an absolute minefield, to be honest with you, but the basics, or some of the basics, are things that the landlords would need to be compliant before we can list a property. So, photo IDs, proof of address, proving that they're the owner of the property. There are a few of the compliance boxes that we would be ticking as the agent, making sure that they've got the right buildings insurance in place, which is going to cover them for having a tenant in the property. Everything else then is kind of tenancy related. So to make sure that the tenancy is compliant, we'd be looking at obviously EPC before the property goes to market, gas safety certificate to make sure any gas appliances within the property and the gas going into the property are safe, EICR, which is one of the recent additions to the legislation for landlord.
What's an EICR?
The electrical installation certificate. CO alarms, so carbon monoxide detectors where there are gas appliances within the property or solid fuel burning appliances, so an open fire or a wood burner. What else have we got now?
There seems to be quite, I suppose, sort of fire regulation as well, if there are any fire doors perhaps maybe need, or is that not necessary?
Yeah, it's not something for residential, but yeah, where student accommodation comes into it, that's where that would apply. But in terms of student accommodation, it's not something that we get involved too heavily with. We've got a couple of landlords that have got student accommodation, which would obviously come under HMOs, but it's not a big part of our portfolio.
And how are our landlords feeling at the moment? I mean, I know with the Renters Reform Bill that's currently going through Parliament, there is understandably quite a bit of concern about how it's going to work. But even before it came to Parliament last year, how are landlords feeling? Is there a feeling of contentment, or?
I think it just depends on the type of landlord. I think what we're experiencing at the moment is that some of those more accidental landlords, so the landlords that never planned to be a landlord, are probably the more nervous ones at the moment, feeling a little bit anxious. We do have those accidental landlords currently exiting the market, which is not what we want. And obviously for tenant demand, we want to keep as much stock as possible so that we can keep meeting the demand of the tenants that we've got. But I mean, that's difficult to do at the moment because the supply is so low. But in general, yeah, we're finding the accidental landlords are a little bit more nervous. They're needing a bit more hand-holding, lots more advice, which is obviously what we're here for as an agent, whether the property's let through us at the moment or not. But the bigger investor landlords are probably, less nervous, and they're a little bit used to the changes, or more used to the changes, and additions to legislation, changes in compliance. So, yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag at the moment. But those that are exiting the market, we're finding, seem to be more those accidental landlords that never really set out on that path.
And I suppose for landlords, particularly those accidental ones, if they come to you to ask you and your teams to make them fully managed, that takes a lot of the pressure off them, doesn't it? Because then they can get on with their day-to-day while you sort out all...
Yeah.
Because it sounds like there's quite a lot for a landlord to think about. So having it fully managed must be a weight off their shoulders.
Oh, absolutely. And fully managed is, it's obviously something that we want as an agent, because we want to be able to support that landlord on their journey and make sure that everything is looked after during the tenancy for them so that they don't have to worry about it. That is the whole idea of having the fully managed service. But for a landlord, yes, it does mean that it's in capable hands. There's somebody else that's looking after, the tenancy, dealing with the tenants' queries, any maintenance that's reported, collecting the rent, chasing the rent if for any reason the tenant doesn't pay, as well as all of the compliance and everything else that comes with that.
Yeah. And in terms of demand, it seems at the moment that there is huge demand and not enough supply. Is that a nationwide problem, or is it specific just to certain parts of the country?
No, it's certainly nationwide, and it's something now that has been going on for, a long time. We'll go back to the recession of kind of 2008, 2009, where we were like overloaded with properties. We never really thought we would see the day where suddenly we've got hardly any stock to offer and lots of tenants searching. It's, not a great problem to continue having. It does mean that rents are rising for landlords for that reason, because the demand is so high and supply is so low. It does mean that we're seeing some quite big rent increases, and some stats I received in the last week just show that the regions that we cover, so with the West Midlands and East Midlands, are up almost 9% kind of year on year, which is, it's a big increase. So it is good news for landlords, but obviously with the cost of living, it's not helping things for tenants, but tenants are still there and the demand is still very, very much more than the supply that we've got.
And you touched on the cost of living there. I mean, not just for tenants, but for landlords as well. And with all the, I suppose, the mini budget of a year or so ago when mortgage rates just went through the roof, that must have been quite a scary thing for landlords as well, because most of them, I would assume, do have some kind of mortgage arrangement.
Yeah, and that's something that we had a bit of a flurry actually towards the end of last year, where a number of landlords were not only needing to increase the rent to kind of a market rate that we would recommend, but they were needing to increase the rent to cover the outgoings on the mortgage and insurances, which obviously we're not in a position to be hiking rents up by £200-300 a month. It's just excessive. But that was a need for some of the landlords, and that has what's pressured some of them into exiting the lettings market and going ahead and selling properties, which is disappointing to see, but also understandable given the situation that they found themselves to be in.
And then it's not good for tenants either, is it? Because then they become potentially homeless, and because those properties don't then go back into the rental market. So for landlords, though, I would have thought if perhaps they were thinking about becoming a landlord or expanding their portfolios, now is probably a good time because the demand is so great. Is that what you...
Yeah, and that's something that we found actually, Kate, is that even though some of those landlords are having to exit and tenants have been asked to vacate, in some cases, the property has then been sold to another investor. In other cases, the property has been sold with a tenant in situ. So it means that actually the positive result of that is that the tenant hasn't had to vacate. They haven't had to find another property to live in, haven't had the upheaval. And then there's a new landlord there with a tenant already in place and receiving rent from the day that they complete on the purchase. So there is some positivity as well.
No, well, that's good to hear, isn't it?
Yeah.
And do you, as a department, have any dealings with any other departments within our business, or is it very much a sort of standalone department? Because I know that some of, say, rural and strategic land and new homes and planning and architecture, they sort of work alongside each other on various projects. But is that same for lettings, or do you tend to be kind of a standalone?
Well, I mean, we've obviously got relationships with all departments, but in terms of the work that we do side by side, not really very much with the other departments, because obviously planning, rural, new homes, I mean, they all work together with, the sales side of things. So we do have some rural estates where properties are let and they're looked after by one of our lettings branches. So we do have some involvement with the rural team. We obviously work very closely with the sales teams to make sure the clients are serviced in the way that they need to be. So if sales are registering new investors or buy-to-let clients, or clients that want to increase their portfolio, they'll be speaking to the lettings team straight away so that our lettings departments can contact that potential buyer, talk to them about the purchase that they want to make, assist them in finding the right property that has a good rental return for them, because we want to make sure that there's going to be minimum void periods and a good return on the investment for the landlord. But the other departments, not so much.
Right. Okay. So hopefully, despite the increased rents and some of the challenges for landlords, there must be some positive, good news about. So tell me what good news there is for landlords.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of the time there is that kind of, scare fest, really. And that's what we want to try and pull landlords away from. So there are lots of changes. And when it comes to those changes, they're quite often out of our control. But what we can do is, continue to deliver the correct advice and services to be able to make landlords feel more at ease, more comfortable. Obviously, we can't control the cost rises. We can't control the rental income. We can offer the best advice possible to the landlords to be able to manage expectations. But by having our fully managed service, we can assure the landlords that they're in good, capable hands. All of the compliance will be ticked off. There will be an active tenancy. that meets the current legislation. We've got a team of dedicated lettings specialists within the business in all of our branches who can offer the right advice, guidance, support, whether that's with an initial valuation, whether that's with trying to get the property let, property management once there is a tenant in situ, and even assisting them with the move out. But there are also different products and services that we can put in place as well to make sure that the landlord is always protected. So, there's obviously a tenancy deposit scheme that has to be complied with, but there will be the deposit there so that if there are any damages or dilapidations, that's always a big concern that a landlord has. They will be covered at the end of the tenancy. There's also rent recovery protection, which is a service that we offer to ensure that landlords have got cover against non-payment of rent, and then legal expenses cover if they were in an unfortunate position where they have to take the tenant to court and try and get vacant possession of the property. So it isn't all doom and gloom. I think for a new landlord, it's a lot to consider, and it can sound very scary. But as an agent, that's what we're here for, and that's what we specialise in. So we're here to take that weight away.
And your teams are very experienced, aren't they? I think we should give them a big shout out, because they do an awful lot of work that perhaps a lot of landlords and tenants might not appreciate. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and they have been with us for a long time. And they've got many years experience, haven't they? So
absolutely. And it's lettings is not a job for everybody. I think we certainly have some people that come into the industry a little bit blind as to what's going to be involved, really, especially when it comes to the property management side of things. But, we have a service agreement that we have to comply with for the landlord. We have a duty of care to the tenant. So you acting as that middleman, and that isn't always an easy job. It does come with some quite challenging tasks. We've got some very, very good property managers and negotiators, actually, all within the business, as well as a fantastic client finance team, making sure that rents are always receipted and paid to landlords on time. There's a lot of work that goes into just running the day-to-day, regardless of which area of the lettings business that is. So they're all wonderful. I'm very lucky to have all of them behind me and supporting me, and I think our clients are definitely lucky to have them supporting them and looking after their property or portfolio.
Brilliant. And finally, I suppose, looking to the future, do you see positivity, hopefully, in the future for the next year, 2 years, for not just for SBK's landlords, but across the board?
Yeah, I think there's still going to be a fair bit of uncertainty. I think there is going to be a lot of anxiousness, I think, especially for new landlords. But I think it's just going to be one of those that investing in property is still going to be a way to go. And it's just landlords getting their head around the changes and what they may look like. People need to rent, again, going back to kind of early 2000s, when I first joined the industry, actually, I remember that lettings was very much about, businessmen who needed to be in the area for work, and they were working away from families, so they needed somewhere kind of Monday to Friday. Or it was people that just needed that bit of a stopgap between selling one property and buying another property, or they might have had a fire or a flood and their insurance company might have been paying the rent. So it was all very much kind of shorter term lets that might have lasted no longer than about 6 to 9 months. But now, letting, or renting, should I say, it is a way of life. It's something that people need to do, and certainly more longer term now as well. So, we've even found over the recent years that we would have a landlord who might also be a tenant because they're not in a position to sell their current property and upsize, or sell the current property and downsize, or whatever that may look like. So they would let the current property and then rent another one until circumstances change. So, things have certainly changed and developed over kind of the 20 years that I've been in the industry. So I just see that changes will be accepted, whatever they may look like, and things will just continue to move forward.
And everybody needs somewhere to live, don't they?
Yes,
so whether it's
absolutely
as a home buyer or as a renter, we all need somewhere to live, don't we?
Absolutely. So we just need more landlords, really. So if there's any landlords out there that are looking at this right now, then we're for Warwickshire, Leicestershire, Worcestershire, then give us a call, please.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, Becca, thank you so much for having a chat. I really appreciate you coming in today. And thank you so much for joining us on our latest podcast, and see you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.